Hey everyone, this is a piece from the second volume of A Libertarian Reader, Fighting for Freedom, 1897 to 1936, edited by Ian McKay. This piece is titled To All Peasants and Workers of the Ukraine by the Revolutionary Insurgent Army of the Ukraine, Makhnovtsi, from the 7th of January, 1920. Footnote. This translation is by Anne Allen and Peter Arshinov. History of the Makhnovtsi Movement, put out by Freedom Press 2002. There's a little introduction here. Issued during the Russian Civil War, this declaration summarizes the position of the biggest anarchist influence movement of the period. Founded by Nestor Makhno, the army applied libertarian ideas in the midst of conflict with white, red, and Ukrainian nationalist authorities. Unlike the Red Army, the Makhnovtsists were organized democratically and encouraged working-class self-management and freedom in the areas it defended. It was finally defeated when betrayed by the Bolsheviks after they played a crucial role in destroying the last white army under Wrangel. Okay, that's the end of the introduction. It says, there's a little introduction here that says, a new introduction, I guess, by the authors of this message to the workers and peasants of the Ukraine. It says, to be transmitted by telegraph, telephone, or post to all villages, townships, districts, and provinces of the Ukraine, to be read in village assemblies, factories, and workshops. Brother Toilers, the Revolutionary Insurgent Army of the Ukraine Makhnovtsi was called into being as a protest against the oppression of workers and peasants by the bourgeois landlord authorities on one side and the Bolshevik communist dictatorship on the other, setting itself the goal to fight for the complete liberation of the toilers of the Ukraine from the yoke of this or that power and to create a true Soviet socialist order. The insurgent army of Makhnovtsi has fought persistently on several fronts to achieve these objectives and at the present time to finish the struggle against Denikin's army, liberating district after district from every coercive power and every coercive organization. Footnote. Anton Ivanovich Denikin, who lived from 1872 to 1947, was a Russian lieutenant general in the Imperial Russian Army and afterwards a leading general of the counter-revolutionary white movement in the Russian Civil War. Denikin's troops almost captured Moscow in the summer of 1919, but the Makhnovtsi attack on their extended lines of supply forced the whites to retreat. Once the threat of Denikin was over, the Soviet government tore up its agreement with the Makhnovtsi in the middle of January 1920. However, attacking the Makhnovtsi allowed the whites to regroup under Baron Wrangel and attack, so extending the Civil War. End footnote. Many peasants and workers have raised the question, what will there be now? What is to be done? How shall we respond to the decrees of the evicted authorities, etc.? To such questions, the final answer will be given by the All-Ukrainian Workers and Peasants Congress, which must meet at once as soon as the workers and peasants are able to attend it. This Congress will discuss and decide all urgent questions concerning worker and peasant life. In view of the fact that such a Congress will soon be convened, the insurgent army of Makhnovtsi deems it necessary to issue the following declaration concerning the questions of worker and peasant life. 1. All decrees of the Denikin Voluntary Army are hereby abolished. Those decrees of the communist authorities which conflict with the interests of the peasants and workers are likewise abolished. Note, in this connection, which of the decrees the communist authorities are harmful to the toilers must be decided by the toilers themselves in their village assemblies and in factories and shops. 2. The land of the gentry, the church, and other enemies of the toilers with all its livestock and equipment must be transferred to the peasants who live on it only by their own labor. The transfer will take place in organized manner according to the decisions of peasant assemblies, which must take into account not only their own local interests, but also common interests of the whole oppressed laboring peasantry. 3. The factories, workshops, mines, and other means of production are to become the possession of the working class as a whole, which through its trade unions will take all enterprises in its own hands, resume production, and strive to link together the industry of the whole country in a single united organization. 4. It is proposed that all organizations of workers and peasants begin to create free workers and peasant soviets. These soviets must consist only of toilers engaged in some form of labor that is necessary for the national economy. Representatives of political organizations have no place in workers and peasant soviets, for their participation will transform the latter into soviets of party deputies, which can only bring about the demise of the Soviet order. Footnote. As discussed elsewhere, such as in the introduction to the 2019 edition of Volley and the Unknown Revolution, 1917 to 1921, this did not mean members of political parties were banned from standing for election. The Mensheviks, Bolsheviks, and left SRs were elected to Makhnovtsi organized congresses and Soviets. Rather, it is a reference to peculiarities within the Russian Soviet system, which allowed various parties voting representation in Soviet executive committees, members appointed by parties and not elected from workplaces. In addition, voting was usually by party list, and this meant so-called delegates could be anyone. In 1920, a chemical factory elected left Menshevik Julius Martov to the Moscow Soviet, defeating the equally well-known chemical worker It's not right. Oh, I think it's a joke. Oh, this line's a joke, so it kind of threw me off. In addition, voting was usually by party list, and this meant so-called delegates could be anyone. In 1920, a chemical factory elected left Menshevik Julius Martov to the Moscow Soviet, defeating the equally well-known chemical worker Vladimir Lenin. In short, members of parties could be elected by convincing those they worked with to elect them rather than, say, being appointed via the party leadership or as part of a party list. End footnote. 5. The existence of Cheka's party committees or similar coercive authoritarian and disciplinary institutions is impermissible among peasants and workers. Footnote. The Cheka, or the All-Russian Extraordinary Commission for Combating Counter-Revolution and Sabotage, was a Soviet secret police force created by the Council of People's Commissars in December 1917. Ostensibly created to combat white forces, it was soon used against opponents on the left, starting with the anarchists in April 1918, as well as protesting workers and peasants. Its creation was in direct opposition to Lenin's statement in The State and Revolution that a so-called workers' state would not have a, quote, special body of armed men, end quote, separate from the armed population. End footnote. 6. Freedom of speech, press, assembly, trade unions, and the like is an inalienable right of every worker, and any limitation of this right represents a counter-revolutionary act. 7. State militias, police, and armies are hereby abolished. In their place, people will organize their own self-defense units. Self-defense must be organized only by workers and peasants. Footnote. Anarchist support for people's militias to defend freedom from those seeking to rule or coerce others is long-standing. In 1849, Proudhon argued for a democratic military and property is theft, as did Bakunin, Kropotkin, Malatesta, Berkman, and others. End footnote. 8. Workers and Peasant Soviets, the self-defense units of the workers and peasants, and the individual peasant and worker must not allow any counter-revolutionary manifestations by the bourgeoisie or military officers, nor must they allow the emergence of banditry. Anyone convicted of counter-revolutionary acts or of banditry will be shot on the spot. 9. Soviet and Ukrainian money must be accepted along with all other kinds of money. Violators of this rule will be subject to revolutionary punishment. 10. The exchange of goods and products until taken over by the workers' and peasants' organizations will remain free. But at the same time, it is proposed that the exchange of products take place for the most part between toilers. All individuals who attempt to hinder the distribution of this declaration will be regarded as counter-revolutionaries. Signed, the Military Revolutionary Council and Command Staff of the Revolutionary Insurgent Army of the Ukraine, Makhnovtsi, 7th of January, 1920. Footnote. Further details of the Makhnovtsi can be found in the accounts of two participants of the movement, Volin's The Unknown Revolution and Peter Arshinov's The History of the Makhnovtsi Movement. See also Alexandra Skurda, Nestor Makhno, Anarchist Cossack, The Struggle for Free Soviets in the Ukraine, 1917 to 1921, and Michael Mallet, or Mallet, Nestor Makhno in the Russian Civil War. And footnote. The end.